Hey, welcome to the post-Week 9 edition of the College 12-Pack. I'm your host, Patrick Conn, senior editor of the College Wires. With me, as always, Tyler Nettuno from LSU Tigers Wire. And as we get ready to turn the calendar to the month of November, which means college football playoff rankings will be coming out on Tuesday, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the show. But I want to start this off a little differently this week, Tyler. Taking a page out of Ed Orgeron / Pete Carroll's playbook, let's tell the truth Monday. And I really want to kick this off by looking at Jeff Lebby costing Oklahoma football games. I think his conservative approach has hurt him in the last 3 weeks. And Tyler, I think you've kind of been on the same boat here. Is Oklahoma, much like USC with their defense, Oklahoma has been playing with fire the last few weeks with these close games. Against Texas, they had to come from behind. Against UCF, they had the boneheaded 2-point conversion try by UCF that allowed Oklahoma to win that football game. And then this last Saturday with the Kansas game, I think the conservativeness of Jeff Lebby cost them this game against Kansas, who, hat tip to Lance Leipold and the job that he's done in Lawrence. That is still a game where I feel like Oklahoma should have won had it not been for the way that Jeff Lebby kind of played that game all the way out.
Yeah, especially in a game where, Jalen Daniels didn't play, Jason Bean throws a pair of interceptions. Like, you had opportunities to win this game if you're Oklahoma, but you didn't. You lose to Kansas for the first time since 1997, I believe. And yeah, I mean, it's frustrating. I think we both are a little surprised at the way this has played out. Last year, the defense was the real problem. It was an underachieving unit that held the team back. It's not elite this year, but it's better. It's improved. It's good enough to win games. And now it kind of seems like the offense is holding it back, despite having a guy in Dylan Gabriel that was getting some Heisman buzz earlier. I've already done my rant about Jeff Lebby as it pertains to the whole Art Briles thing. So I'll spare you all that this time. But I mean, to me, this kind of goes hand in hand with that. That was a bad look for the university. And it's like, what is this guy here for? You know what I mean? If he's doing stuff like that and he's not fundamentally, bringing a lot to the table offensively, like, what is he here for?
Yeah, you look at it, and you're right, especially with Dylan Gabriel and the offense that they have. They look a lot better than they did last year, especially on the defensive side of the ball. The defense really isn't the question here. And it's almost interesting that we're bringing up offensive woes at Oklahoma for a team that's scoring north of 41 points per game if you look at the stats. But if you break it down by only Big 12 games, that number drops down to 33. And when you are playing closer games, there has that opportunity for Oklahoma to get upset. And while I agree that Venables has Oklahoma in the right direction, especially after what transpired last year, it's Jeff Lebby's offense that is going to cost them games and why I worry about them. When you look at how, like I said, the conservative play, and when you look at, their issues in the red zone, therein lies the problem right there. And it feels like, I don't know if you agree here, but it feels like that offense disappears at times.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not, as consistent as it needs to be. It made enough plays, really it capitalized on enough plays, in the end zone in the red zone to beat Texas. Texas couldn't do that enough. And that was how Oklahoma won that game. But we've seen this offense just struggle to be consistent. They in Big 12 games that they should have won, or sorry, just games in general that they should have won, by a larger degree. I mean, 20-6 against Cincinnati, a pretty bad Cincinnati team, couldn't really pull away offensively in that game. And the same thing sort of happened against SMU. You hold both those teams under 13 points, but, they were still sort of at least, in doubt a bit down the stretch because, you're just not quite able to pull away right now. And it's weird because I feel like when you look at what this team has, personnel wise on offense, it shouldn't be as much of a limiting factor as it is. I mean, it's kind of inexplicable to me.
But then we have the other side of that conversation, and for Tell the Truth Monday, Tyler, you're looking at Dabo Swinney. What are you telling the truth on this Monday?
Absolutely, I'm looking at Dabo Swinney. So Clemson loses on Saturday on the road at NC State, falls 24-17. Clemson now 4-4 on the year, ostensibly out of the ACC race, which would in turn functionally end this team's 12-year streak of winning double-digit games. First time they've lost 4 games since 2011. First time they've been sitting at 4-4 since 2010. So really untrodden territory for this Clemson program since Dabo really got things moving. And look, I think we've seen this coming the last couple of years. We've seen a bit of a drop off since they lost. They had a stretch of back-to-back generational quarterbacks in Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. Since Trevor left, we've seen, a bit of a drop off there. And then this year, things are really things are really coming off this year. And I mean, it's really hard to ignore the fact that Dabo is a coach that has made it pretty clear that not only is he not particularly interested in using the transfer portal or, name, image, and likeness to bring people to campus, he actually seems to have some sort of moral, principled opposition to using it. He thinks it's like bad to build a program that way. And if you can build a program without doing that, that's fine. But this is 2023. This is what everyone's doing. And if you're going to be a maverick and you're going to buck that trend and say, I'm not going to do what all these other top programs are doing, you have to, succeed. And he's not right now. So my tell the truth is, Dabo, tell the truth about why this situation has gotten to where it is. I mean, after the game, he said something like, just some bizarre things have happened. I'm not really sure how to explain it. I can explain it. This team isn't that talented. They don't have the guys. We look at when these teams were great. They had, Mike Williams. They had DeAndre Hopkins. They had Sammy Watkins, Justin Ross, T. Higgins. They had all these playmakers out wide. They don't have anyone like that right now. So, I mean, you look at, where this team's at down the stretch, things aren't trending well. They could easily, with games against Notre Dame, North Carolina, South Carolina, I mean, we could really see things get dicey here. And I mean, Dabo is young. He's only 53, but I don't think this is where anyone thought it would be, at this point in his trajectory. And I don't really know where things are heading right now.
Well, let's just look at the transfer portal rankings just from the 2023 cycle. Just in the ACC, your number one team was Florida State. I think we know why they've been so successful this year. Miami, number 2, Louisville, number 3, and North Carolina, number 4. Those 4 teams are all among the top part of the ACC standings. Not surprising. Clemson sitting at 2-4 in conference play, dead last in the transfer portal rankings for the ACC. They brought in 1 recruit. And if you look at Florida State, again, 12 commits, Miami 17, Louisville brought in 25, North Carolina brought in 10. That is all you need to know when in terms of teams are getting better around you and you are doing absolutely nothing but almost like resting on your laurels because you think that because you've had this string of double-digit wins, it's that you don't need to do anything.
Yeah, and I'll give, in Dabo's defense a little bit here, their need to portal isn't as prominent as some other teams because they don't really lose guys to the portal either. And that's one thing I'll give him credit for. He tends to keep guys there. So when you do that, you're not needing to like portal an entire unit every offseason. But with that being said, I mean, homegrown talent is great. That's what everyone wants. That's the goal. But even teams like Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State that do that still go in the portal sometimes to plug holes. If you lose an All-American offensive lineman or, linebacker, whatever, like you can go pick up a guy that's experienced and that can, really make a difference in keeping things from dropping off too much year after year. He hasn't done that. So I think something's got to give here because I don't really see, you look at where they're recruiting, it's fine. It's like top 20 level, but they're not really pushing top 10 on an annual basis anymore. So, I don't really see how this is going to get better without some sort of, moment of reflection for Dabo where he changes his philosophy on these things because this just clearly is not working.
Yeah, it's clear that Florida State, Miami are clearly doing those things. Transfer portal, better recruiting, NIL. We've seen it, and that's why a lot of Clemson fans are upset right now. And I'm not saying Clemson needs to be saying we need to find a new coach, not anything of that. But there needs to be a change of philosophy in Death Valley, I think, for Clemson to get back to where they were prior to missing out on 2 of the last 3 ACC title games. But let's talk about, while we're in the ACC, let's talk about the choke job of the week. And for me, Tyler, I'm going with the North Carolina defense, allowing Georgia Tech to rush for over 240 yards in the fourth quarter alone. If you watch this game, especially towards the end, you had the feeling that North Carolina just could not stop a Georgia Tech offense that's been middling through this year. And a big reason why North Carolina will not be playing for the ACC title either, because of that defense.
Yeah, Georgia Tech's just been a really inconsistent team this year. We've seen them look like this a bit at times. They gave Louisville a run for their money, obviously win this game. They also have some bad losses in there, got blown out by Boston College. This is tough for North Carolina. I mean, the tone has changed so significantly in the last 2 weeks. I mean, I think when they were 6-0, I think you and I both thought that this could be possibly a real threat in the ACC, maybe a threat to Florida State. But, I mean, not anymore. Defensively, I think I was at least cautiously optimistic that things were getting better. It looked like the unit had taken some sort of step forward. But after this, I don't know, man. I mean, Georgia Tech was basically scoring at will in the second half of that game. I mean, I was watching that. That was one of the ones I kind of had my eye on in that late night, and it was tough. I mean, I don't know what to make of this North Carolina team right now. It's a shame that you're wasting, a guy in Drake May who's just really, really good, maybe going to be the first overall pick in a couple months. So it's tough, but yeah, obviously this North Carolina team not reaching that ceiling we thought it maybe could a couple weeks ago.
It's really not, and that's their big problem. I mean, we've seen these teams that are starting out hot, and now it's kind of like they're cooling off a little bit. And I think we both agree that UNC's offense is not the problem. It's definitely that defense, and I'm a little surprised that a Gene Chizik defense is playing this poorly. Not sound football, but even as bad as it is in Chapel Hill right now with losses in the last 2 games, what about Washington State? If we go up to Pullman, Washington, and look at what has transpired under Dykert there, it is not good as far as what we thought we were getting with Washington State as the season kicked off.
Yeah, I mean, a team that looked like maybe it was going to be a dark horse contender in the conference, when it knocked off Oregon State earlier in the year. Things have not really gone that well since then. They're 4-4, lost on the road on Saturday, 38-27 at Arizona State. That's tough. I mean, this is not a very good Arizona State team. We've seen quick turnarounds are kind of a lot more workable now in the portal era, but Kenny Dillingham inherited a really bad roster at Arizona State, just had a lot of problems that Herm Edwards left. This was always going to be a rough year, and it didn't look like they were maybe going to win a Pac-12 game, but they get this one. This is tough for Washington State. I mean, like I said, they fall to 4-4. All of a sudden, what looked like a promising season, it really just isn't. You got a guy in Cam Ward who's taken a step forward overall this year, has had a couple off games, but still been overall pretty solid. It just hasn't been enough, in these games. And, you look at what's down the stretch for them. I mean, they could definitely end this season on a pretty high note. I mean, they've got Cal, they got Stanford, they got Colorado. Those are all 3 winnable games before they finish the year against Washington. So, 7-5, possibly still, in the picture, but I don't think that's really where this team wanted to be. You could easily be worse than that if you slip up against, Colorado or something like that. So, I mean, I think it's tough. Jake Dykert's a guy that I had going into the year on my preseason hot seat list. I kind of thought he was coaching his way off that, had been doing a pretty impressive job. I still don't think he's on the hot seat just because of everything this program has to figure out in terms of its football future. Kind of has a lot of existential problems. I don't think you really want to add a coaching search to that, especially when this guy's been solid at least, but not a good year for them. Not the year it was looking like it was shaping up to be. And kind of just like North Carolina, a team that we thought maybe had some potential to shake things up. Just not quite there yet, though.
They are not quite there. Losers of their last 4 games, 3 out of 4 on the road, which, it is tough to win on the road. But the fact that their offense, who we thought was pretty good, has not scored more than 27 points a game in each of the last 4 games. Played close-ish to Oregon, but loses by 14. But staying in the Pac-12, Tyler, let's talk about your statement game. Who made a statement for you in Week 9?
I mean, you just said them. It was the Oregon Ducks, went on the road, beat Utah 35-6. I mean, this is a Utah team that hadn't lost in Salt Lake City since 2020. And I mean, obviously 2020, a year with limited fan attendance. So that's not quite the full home field experience. Before that, they hadn't lost at home since 2018. So this is a team that plays really, really well at their own house, and Oregon just absolutely demolished them. This team is really, really good. Really good on both sides of the ball. Bo Nix is playing at a really high level. All the memes and jokes about him, those are dead now. He's a very good quarterback. He's a consistent quarterback. He's a trustworthy quarterback. He's a smart quarterback. He's a talented quarterback. He's what, this team needs. He's got a great running back in Bucky Irving to help him out. This defense is fantastic. I mean, they really harassed Bryson Barnes all day in this game, who's coming off the best game of his season against USC. This Oregon team is really good. I mean, you look at what they got. There's some tricky games, obviously, coming down the stretch. It's not going to be easy. You got to beat USC, you got to beat Oregon State. But if they win out in those games, get their shot again against Washington, I'm probably going to pick them to win that game. And, no disrespect to Washington. Like, what happens on the field matters, and they won on the field. That was a really tight game, though. It could have gone either way, and it was in Seattle. Give me this game on a neutral site. I think I'm going to go Oregon.
I'm afraid that Trojan fans have fooled everyone to thinking Bryson Barnes was a more than serviceable quarterback. And we saw what happened when they played a really good defense, 35-6. It's interesting that both teams from Houston in the Power 5 level lost games 35-6 on the same weekend. At the same time, they were both 2:30 kickoffs, Central Time. So I found that quite funny. But I'm going to go with Kansas State as my statement game. Kansas State is a team. They run the ball really well. They play good defense. And it feels like this is the time of year when Kansas State starts destroying people. And that is what they did to Houston, 41-0. Houston's offense couldn't get anything going in this game. And it's looking like next week against Texas might be a Big 12 championship semifinal game as they will play the Texas Longhorns, as they're both tied at the top of the conference with a 4-1 record in conference play. And the other semifinal will be Oklahoma State, which that'll be an interesting game. But, if you look at what Kansas State's able to do defensively, not allowing Donovan Smith to do anything offensively, and it just brings more questions to Dana Holgerson's ability. But as far as what Kansas State can do, this was an obvious statement. You beat a team by 40-plus points. I don't care who it is. That's an impressive victory. And now Kansas State is on the march back to the Big 12 title game. We'll see if they get there.
Yeah, and we'll get into the Dana implications of this game a little bit later in the show. But yeah, I mean, Kansas State, a team that we kind of, I feel like, wrote off a little bit because, they lose early in the season to Missouri. They lose to Oklahoma State. Those are two losses that didn't look great at the time. Now, though, I mean, Missouri's a really good team. Oklahoma State hitting their stride. Look, you kind of nailed it. This is kind of what this Kansas State team does. This is their MO. They get to this point in the season and they really just get comfortable and start just being a machine. Chris Kleiman's built a machine and they destroy people. And I'm really interested to see what they can do against Texas next week. I mean, look, we saw at least a little bit of struggles from Malik Murphy. I think if he's the guy moving forward with the way that this defense played against a Houston team that with Donovan Smith, like, I don't think that's a bad Houston offense by any means. It's been a little bit up and down, but it's, had some big games to blank them like that. I mean, that is impressive. And it makes me wonder, what they could do against a Texas team with a pretty inexperienced quarterback in Malik Murphy. So yeah, that game's going to be really interesting. And, if they win it, they are kind of in the driver's seat to go back to the Big 12 championship. So, just really impressive to have those two early season losses and sort of battle back from it and be playing the way they are right now. Just a testament to the kind of program that Chris Kleiman's built.
They are a machine, like you said, and this goes back to, the culture that Kleiman is instilling. I mean, he knows how to win national championships. He did it at North Dakota State. We know what kind of machine they've been. Coming to Kansas State, now he's really putting his footprint on it. And why Kansas State might be the best team going into the new Big 12 next year. Not taking anything away from the four teams that'll be joining, but Kansas State seems to be really comfortable with the way that they play football, like you said, and now they're getting ready for this huge matchup with Texas, which will be interesting, especially if we want to see the Quinn Ewers situation. Is he going to play this week? I think with him, they have a lot better shot. Without him, against Malik Murphy, who looked okay last week in his first start, so we'll see how that all plays out. But as far as the team that they played against, the Houston Cougars, we're going to talk hot seat update, and I feel like this is a weekly Dana segment. Dana Holgorsen, known for his offense, losing 41-0. His offense never really got much going. If you look at what they were able to do or not able to do, you have to put him on the list once again, and it makes me wonder how much Houston wants to put up with this kind of lackluster performance now that they are at the Power 5 level.
Yeah, I think we talked about how, Dana sort of handled what looked like a really pivotal 2-game stretch about as well as he could have, beats his former team in West Virginia. That would have been one where the angst would have gotten really high if they had lost. And then, you don't beat Texas, but you played them tough, had a chance to win at the end. I think that's more than anyone really realistically expected they would do in that game. But this is tough. It goes to show just why it's different, competing in a Power 5 conference, because you just played Texas. That was a tough emotional game at home. And then you immediately got to go play a Kansas State team that's just a meat grinder of a football team. So it's tough. And I think this might do it for Dana. They're 3-5, right? 3-5?
Yeah, 3-5.
Yeah. So, you look at, there is a path to bowl eligibility here. Looking at what they got down the stretch, it's, I want to say, sorry, they got Baylor, they got Cincinnati, they got Oklahoma State, and they got UCF. So Baylor, Cincy, and UCF are all teams that have really struggled this year. I think all three of those are sort of toss-up-ish games. Probably not going to beat Oklahoma State. But if you win those 3 games, you're going to a bowl game. If you do that, you might be the only bowl eligible team of these Big 12 newcomers. So, maybe that's enough to keep Dana. I don't really think so, though, especially just with all the young coaching talent in the state of Texas. They could easily go get someone that would just bring a lot of energy into that program and sort of take advantage of the resources there.
Well, it's interesting because against this Kansas State defense, a guy who's known for offense, Dana Holgorsen, 208 total yards, 7 drives ended in their own territory. So they're not even getting across the 50-yard line, which if you go back and look at how Kansas State played against my Red Raiders a couple weeks ago, Texas Tech, who has all kinds of offensive problems with their quarterback situation, were able to score points and to get into enemy territory. But Dana, I just – the thing that makes me scratch my head is I don't understand why, given that I felt like Donovan Smith was a good, capable quarterback to do what they needed, and he's looked good at times, but it just seemed like Kansas State knew exactly what they were going to be doing in this football game.
Yeah, it's just – like I said, it's just kind of goes to show how difficult it is to compete in these power conferences week in and week out. All these newcomers have struggled with that. None of them are really putting together the kind of year that I think any of them had in mind when they joined the Power 5 level. So I think, maybe there is kind of a sliding scale we should be grading Dana on in that regard, but it's not like they were killing it in the American either. Like they were sort of underachieving there. I just don't know where the momentum is here behind Dana right now. He's been here long enough. He's had time to build. I don't know if this is the foot this program wants to put forward moving into its Big 12 future, especially with, this new group of newcomers set to arrive. You're going to have teams like Utah in the conference. We'll see what Colorado becomes. Arizona looks pretty good. There's going to be a lot of good programs. And Houston could easily be near the bottom of them if they don't figure things out.
Speaking of coaches who better figure something out, Pat Narduzzi has spent the last couple off seasons running his mouth. But this time he opened his mouth during the season, and it is not going well in Pittsburgh.
No, a guy that really hasn't been present in a lot of hot seat discussion this season, but honestly, maybe he should be. Look, they're 2-6. They lost 58-7 at Notre Dame on Saturday, which Notre Dame's really good. I think that's a team that's kind of hitting its stride, but no excuses to lose a game like that. I mean, they're really bad. Aside from kind of an inexplicable game where they put it all together and beat Louisville comfortably, which again just makes absolutely no sense in retrospect after what Louisville did on Saturday, shutting out Duke. But other than that, there really hasn't been much to write home about from this team. And Pat Narduzzi, they've taken a massive step back, right? They win the ACC 2 years ago. They go 9-4 last year, which is fine when you're losing Kenny Pickett, but they're now 2-6, pretty much guaranteed going to miss a bowl game. And after the game, he goes on this diatribe, which, I mean, I think people are overreacting to a little bit, but he basically says, we lost a lot of good players from last season. I thought we replaced them. We obviously haven't. And a lot of the current players saw that quote on Twitter and started, quote tweeting it. We're pretty upset about it. Just a pretty bad look overall for the program, for the head coach to be saying that. I saw at least one of those guys that quote tweeted it was a transfer addition. So a guy, assumingly one of the guys that Narduzzi brought in to replace the outgoing talent. So, I mean, just not the kind of thing you want to say when you're 2-6. It's kind of locker room losing material right there. This thing is going kind of downhill. And all I got to say is Michigan State, if you're considering bringing this guy in, what are you doing?
Yeah, not great. As far as the post-game comments, I would call that how to lose a locker room in 5 seconds, because that's essentially what you could do. Now, he did tweet out his comments, but still, just don't say it. That's the rule of thumb is just don't say it. All right, so let's talk about the college football playoff. Let's talk about teams who are doing it right. Tyler, start off here. Who are your top 4 teams going into the college football playoff rankings reveal on Tuesday night?
Yeah, so just to be clear, this is what I think is going to happen. This is like my prediction. So obviously I'm starting off Georgia. I mean, I'm not sure I think Georgia's the best team in the country right now. As I've kind of said before, I kind of think that might be Michigan, but Georgia's looked good enough. They've got the winning streak going. I think they're a pretty safe bet to stand atop there. I think if I stuck with the polls, the polls this week, it'd probably be a pretty safe bet, but just for the sake of argument, I think Ohio State's going to be number 2. Most of the polls have Michigan number 2, but Ohio State, the CFP rankings seem to really lean on like resume, and Ohio State has the strongest resume of anyone in the country. It's pretty hard to argue with that. Road win against a really good Notre Dame team, and then pretty dominating victory over Penn State, at least defensively. So I've got them at 2, followed by Michigan at 3, and then Florida State rounding it out at 4. That's my top
4. Same 4 teams, a little different. I think Ohio State's number 1. I think they have the best resume. Yes, Georgia hasn't lost, but to me, I just look at what Ohio State's done. You say what you want about the quarterback play not being where it was under, C.J. Stroud. Kyle McCord's doing what he needs to do, being the bus driver of that offense. And anytime you can just throw it to Marvin Harrison Jr., it's probably a good call. But I'm going to go with Ohio State at number 1. I'm going to follow that up with Georgia at number 2. I got Florida State at number 3, and Michigan at number 4. And I'll just tell you this. The reason why is I just feel like the resumes, when we talk about the resumes, Michigan has the worst resume of any of the top 4 teams. But I think because of their domination, they're easily ahead of the teams that are going to be at 5 and 6. So, Tyler, can you see an argument for putting Michigan at number 4, or do you think I'm just absolutely crazy?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a kind of comes down to what your school of thought is as far as how to put these rankings together. I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. There's no denying that this Michigan team has far and away the weakest resume of the teams that we have in the top 4. Florida State's got the LSU win, which looks better every single week. They've got the Clemson win, which not so much, but it was on the road, still a good win. And you've got Ohio State, obviously, like we talked about. Georgia, I mean, they haven't played a lot of great teams, but I mean, they beat Kentucky, they beat Florida, they beat South Carolina. Like, that's better than a lot of what Michigan's had to play so far. So there's no doubt about that. I mean, to me, my Michigan thing is it's honestly it's an eye test thing. I think they just look really, really good. I think JJ McCarthy has taken a big step. I think they're really good defensively. So, like I said, they're the team that I think right now might look like the best team in the country to me. But if you view this as, what have you proven? What's your resume? Absolutely, they have the weakest of those four.
All right, so going in at number 5, so we're going to talk about the first two out. And at number 5, I think we both agree it's Washington.
Yep.
Undefeated team in the Pac-12. Offense has been really good this year. My questions start with Washington based on how they played against the two Arizona schools. And they beat an Oregon team in a game that could have really gone either way for that one. But I feel like Washington is the best at just that next spot out.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I have some questions about Washington, truthfully. I mean, the way they played the last really probably should have lost to Arizona State. Very easily could have lost to Stanford on Saturday night. I mean, this team is kind of playing with fire. They deserve to be there because they're undefeated and they have the win over Oregon, and you can't take that away from them. And Michael Penix Jr. is still playing at an insanely high level. But I do think that there are some cracks beginning to show. I have some concerns about this team, and it's kind of why I don't love their chances if they have to play Oregon again. But they're undefeated. They have the Oregon win, and they deserve to be number 5.
Okay. I think we're in agreement there, but let's talk about who should be in that 6th spot. Who are you going with?
Yeah, we might disagree on this one. I've got Texas. I really considered Oregon because I really like Oregon. I think they're really good, but I still think Texas, it's pretty hard to ignore the resume they have, right? I mean, going on the road and beating Alabama at home, I think we thought at the time maybe this was an Alabama team that had taken a step back. I don't really think that's the case. I think this win, just the more time that passes by, the better that win looks for Texas, especially because I think they really outplayed them. I think it was very clear that they were the better team in that game. So, and the one loss came, I don't want to call it fluky because Oklahoma deserved to win that game. But it was a, back and forth shootout-y kind of game, could have easily gone the other way. I mean, and since then, Texas has looked pretty solid other than, kind of letting things get a little scary at the end against Houston. Obviously everything with Texas might depend on the health of Quinn Ewers, and that's something to monitor moving forward. But I still think right now, I like to view this as a resume ranking, and to me, they're pretty clearly the next best team.
I am going to surprise you. I'm also going to say Texas. Kind of gone back and forth between Texas and Oregon. I just look at Texas, like you said, the resume speaks for itself. They beat a Kansas team pretty handedly, who just handed Oklahoma their first loss of the season. They did lose to Oklahoma in the Red River Shootout, but they have the game. That was a close matchup. They obviously beat Alabama. They beat a very stingy Wyoming team this year. When you look at the resume altogether, I like Texas. Oregon was kind of that next one in there based on what they were able to do against Utah. They've looked pretty good, and they'll have their opportunity as they go down. And it kind of looks like we might be seeing Washington and Oregon one more time in the Pac-12 title game. So they'll have their opportunities. So right now I think we agree Texas. But one note, just saw a note from David Eichholt, 24/7 Sports, is saying sources that Iowa offensive coordinator Brian Ferentz not expected to return in 2024. So probably finishing out the season, but I don't think any of us thought that Ferentz was going to be on the team as the offensive coordinator heading into next season anyway.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit on last week's show. The contract situation is what it is. He's nowhere close to getting to that 325 point mark. So if they're going to treat that contract as valid, he's gone because they're not going to get there. Regardless, I think it always to me made sense that some sort of mutual parting of ways would happen here. Honestly, even if they hit the 325, unless the offense had taken some sort of significant leap. He's a guy that has NFL experience, will probably end up going there, has some connections with the Patriots organization and Bill Belichick, maybe something to watch there. But look, I don't think Kirk was ever going to fire his son. He definitely wasn't going to fire his son mid-season. This is probably how this was always going to end.
Always how it was going to end. So I guess we can stop the drive to 325 watch because I think we have our answer. All right, so our last segment of the show, let's talk about the most surprising player through Week 9. Tyler, I'm going to let you have the floor on this one.
Yeah, I'm going with a guy who just engineered a really big upset on Saturday night. Arizona quarterback Noah Fafita. Look, he took over for Jaden DeLora, a guy who, the Washington State transfer came into this year with pretty high expectations, got injured early in the year, missed some games. Fafita's come in and played really, really well, arguably been the better of the two quarterbacks. And I don't know what Jaden DeLore's health situation is. You kind of wonder if they're just going to roll with Noah Fafita moving forward. Threw for 275 yards and 3 touchdowns in the upset over Oregon State. Look, we talked about it on the show. This team is really good. They are a dangerous team. I don't think either of us are surprised that they got someone like this. I think it kind of seemed like a matter of time with the way they played, Washington and USC. This is clearly a really good, a really at least feisty football team. And they're 5-3. And you look at what they got down the stretch, they could maybe, do something happen. They could maybe make something happen. They've got the opportunity to, beat a couple ranked teams and a couple more ranked teams. They got Utah coming up and stuff. So I'm really interested in what this team is doing. And I really like Noah Fafita, completing 75% of his passes on the year, got 11 touchdowns, 3 picks. Really good work for a guy coming in due to injury. Like I said, they're probably the most surprising team in the conference this year, in a conference that's very good and filled with teams that are, playing really well.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. There's a big reason why I picked Arizona to upset Oregon State this past weekend because of Noah Fafita and just the way that pesky Wildcat team has played this year. I mean, they've been a lot of fun to watch. They played a lot of teams close. Arizona, feisty. They've lost 2 of their 3 losses came against top 25 opponents, and it was a 1-score game. So just to show you how pesky they are. For me, I'm going to go with Ollie Gordon II, Oklahoma State. Look, he's coming off back-to-back rushing games of over 250 yards, the only other Oklahoma State Cowboy that ever did that was some guy named Barry Sanders. So if you can match Barry Sanders in anything, you're doing something very special. But really, if you look at it, the first 3 games, he was not really that good. He didn't have more than 53 yards rushing in a game. Since that time against Iowa State, Kansas, West Virginia, and Cincinnati, this guy has rushed for 120 or more yards in every game. Against Kansas, he had 168 yards rushing and 116 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns in that game. He leads the nation in rushing with 1,087 yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. This guy has been a weapon for Oklahoma State, and it's not hard to see why Oklahoma State has kind of been on a tear as of late with 4 straight wins.
Yeah, it's always good when you're an Oklahoma State running back and your sole company in something is Barry Sanders, especially at a school that's had guys like Chuba Hubbard, over the years. Look, we talked about it earlier in the show. This Oklahoma State team has really turned it around. Lost 33-7 at home to South Alabama earlier this year. That seems like, in eons ago now. This team's playing a lot better, and Ollie Gordon is the primary reason that that's the case. Already over 1,000 yards on the year. Like you said, going over 200 yards back-to-back games. I mean, this dude is producing at a level that running backs just don't really produce in college football right now. I mean, he's just getting so much work, such a workload, and it's really helped, an Oklahoma State team that, struggled to figure the quarterback situation out. They have now, with Alan Bowman, but this guy really makes his job a lot easier. So, Oklahoma State rallied from a really rough start to the year. They're now right square in the mix to represent, to take one of those 2 spots in the Big 12 championship game. Big game coming up, with Bedlam this coming weekend. If you can upset Oklahoma, you're right there, and I'm really interested to see. I think we were maybe starting to write the epitaph for Mike Gundy earlier in the year. I'm not so sure that's happening right
now. It's really not. And I do want to correct something I said. Ollie Gordon is not leading the nation in rushing touchdowns. He does have 10, but Kyrie Robinson of San Jose State, LaDamian Webb of South Alabama, and Blake Corum of Michigan each have 13. So he is actually down the list a little bit. But still, very impressive the way that he's played and why Oklahoma – that game between Oklahoma State and Oklahoma next week, not only is it probably the likely last bedlam that we're going to get to see, but they have an opportunity to kind of take a step forward to getting to that Big 12 title game once again. They played against Baylor 2 years ago, missed out last year. It could happen. We'll kind of see how it plays out. Maybe we get a rematch of Oklahoma State, Kansas State. That might be an interesting matchup as the weeks to come. All right, but we'll be back on Wednesday as we get you ready for Week 10. Big matchup going down in Tuscaloosa, LSU and Alabama. Essentially the SEC West Championship game. Really, when you look at it, this is going to be a huge matchup. Winner likely plays Georgia once again in the SEC Championship. And another not so great matchup this week, Notre Dame going to Clemson. I think that could get ugly really quickly, but we will check. We'll definitely have to check in on that game and several others. But for Tyler, I'm Patrick. See you on Wednesday.